Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel, hope you're all good and well. So time for a Wednesday album review. This time I'm tackling the latest release from the thrash metal band Evile and their album The Unknown, which came out on Friday the 14th of July last week via Napalm Records. The album is 10 tracks and about 47 minutes in length. This is the band's 6th studio album following on from 2021's Hell Unleashed. The album was very much a pure thrash album, no holds barred, kind of relentless, and slightly more aggressive, I'd say, than some of their previous albums, with singer Matt Drake at the helm as the frontman of the band before brother Ol took over for that album. This album is another pretty noticeable change in direction, the band taking much more of a slower style and doomier style for quite a significant portion of what you get here. Many people have compared this change in direction to what happened with Metallica and their Black album, obviously back in the early 90s. This album also does somewhat remind me of those sort of 1990s Paradise Lost albums, the likes of Icon and Draconian Times spring to mind, as, just with the slower style of those songs, particularly those songs which evoke a feel of that gloomier style of metal. I just felt a bit of a sense of that Paradise Lost era. I think it may also be the way Ol was delivering his vocals, sounding a little bit like a cross between that James Hetfield Black album sound and Nick Holmes as well. Now, for me, this is a little bit of an elephant in the room with Evile, and it is that ever since Matt has departed from the band, I've just felt something missing. I am admittedly very attached to those first 4 albums from the band. Enter the Grave, I mean, that's probably their most critically acclaimed album and a great debut. You also have the likes of Infected Nations, and my favourite album from the band is actually Five Serpents' Teeth. It's also one of my all-time favourite thrash metal albums. Then you have Skull, another great album from the band, released back in 2013. And so this album, for me, whilst it's an experiment, and it's not an experiment that goes wrong, let me be clear, I think this is actually still quite a decent album. It sounds like I'm about to tear it down, but I think this is still quite a decent album. But it's hard to think what this album would be like. I think with Matt Drake's involvement, I think it might have been better. I think his influence on the band is missing, and it's a gap which hasn't really quite been filled. I love Ol, and I think he's fantastic, and I love his contributions. A lot of the contributions on this album are also really, really good. But just because that bar Evile have raised very high in the past, this album doesn't quite stack up for me against those older albums. But, that's not me saying that changing direction is necessarily wrong, or that the bands are at fault for doing that even. But even the slower tracks on here that, I just don't find that they make the impact, actually, of some of the slower tracks they did on older albums. Evile aren't void of slow songs. You listen to some of those older albums like Five Serpents' Teeth, In Memoriam, there are slower tracks on there that are fantastic. So let's remember, Evile can do great slow tracks. Anyway, with that out of the way, I will move on to the tracks and go into some description about this band a little bit more, and go into the tracks description a bit more. So you've got The Unknown, the opening track, the title song, which is a gloomy start to the album. For me, I'm not sure about this choice as a starting album for Evile, a starting song for Evile. Just felt a little bit flat for me, and it's an example of one of those songs on this album that I think, yes, it's obvious that the band are trying something slightly different from the norm, but it doesn't quite hit for me. Actually, one of the later slower tracks I do quite enjoy. The first track which really got my attention on this album was Monolith, with its heavy, crushing, hammer-like guitar riff, which for me is one of the highlights on this whole album, one of the moments where I would actually quite like to revisit that track some more. Ol is embodying that, as I say, that James Hetfield vocal style more, with cleaner singing, even on some of these thrashier tracks. When Mortal Coils Shed, I feel is a better exposition of Ol's cleaner vocals for the slower style of song that the album introduced to us with that first track, the title one. I really like this song, actually. I think it's pretty good. I like the delivery of his vocals, which feel passionate and feel more emotion than The Unknown did, for example. Sleepless Eyes and At Mirror's Speech provide the album's thrash highlights for me, particularly At Mirror's Speech. That's an awesome track. Great groove and variations, and what we love about Evile, I think, is quite often displayed in this song. It's got just that great thrash sound and that element of unpredictability and creativity that we know this band can provide deep down. Beginning of the End is also a pretty cool song, again a thrashier one. Balance of Time is slightly strange. I feel like it finishes slightly abruptly, and the album just kind of has that strange, slight anticlimax to it. And for me, that's the thing with this album, is that it felt like it actually did have potential, but it never quite fully reached that potential for me as a whole album. Now, it sounds like this band's album, can't speak anymore, can't speak properly. Sounds like I'm going to say this album's a bad album. It's not. As I said earlier, I think I said it's pretty decent. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. And the reason is that I think I liked actually that the band have been bold and tried something different with old Drake at the helm. I quite like that idea. And I like that there's still some really good stuff on here, it's not all just kind of, turgid. It's not turgid or too boring all the way through. But yeah, it is for me missing a bit of that X factor that I think, just that extra ingredient that Matt brought that just seems to be missing. Just that bit of extra power maybe somewhere is needed. But you know what? It's still good. I'm still going to give it a 7. I respect the hell out of this band, and I still don't think it's a bad album, but it's a little way off what we usually get from Evile. What do you think about this album? Do you agree, disagree? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, until my next video, which is going to be the Epica Albums Ranked video coming this Saturday. Until then, from me, it's bye for now.